hot box. Thank you. Hey there. Hello. Greetings and salutations. So, gonna do things a little differently with this stream. Give me a moment to pull up a screen for y'all to check out and look at. I would like to do this a little differently, but I might have to do a short upload later. So I had a request, okay, to talk about this topic, because it was brought up the other day, there does seem to be a Trump connection to all this. Now, I was asked before to go into this and check this out, so I am going to do something. The channel obviously will never be monetized, but I am going to throw Sammy's PayPal link into the comments. If you'd like to buy me a coffee, or rather an orange juice, that would be great, since I lost my job and I'm on a fixed income. The channel will never be monetized. I do not charge for truth, and I do not monetize God. So every now and again, though, I will put up my link if times are tough, and just let it sit there, because the time I spent in research is like a job. So yeah, that much is true. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this link in there, and then we'll get started and chat about what's going on here. So there was a Trump connection to all of this, in regards to a connection that he has, his alleged mentor, okay, has really big connections to this church, and even the churches, I say that loosely, even the churches, what would you call it? Their founding. He seems like he was there from the beginning, from the jump. So Trump's mentor might have had more a hand in things than people are aware, but you have these people who say that they're spies, and then they work as double agents. So what we have to do then is just do the footwork. We have to do our due diligence. If there's something comes up that we are confused about, we had no idea about, we don't approve of, whatever, then we should talk about it. We should research it. We should inform ourselves and educate ourselves so that we can make wise decisions, moving forward. So having said that, we're going to read a brief synopsis about what this church is, but then we're going to segue over to a book, and then we'll bounce back to the church. Now, I'm bringing this book up because I've had it for a while now. I told you guys I wanted to read the series on the channel pretty much to you all. That's what I wanted to do. And of course, it's not going to let me listen to it. I'll try it again. Hold, please. I'm dealing with this little, I wanted to pin a comment in there, and I got to make sure we're at least live or showing up somewhere, and I don't see that this video is. Oh, there it is. Cool. Okay. I had to refresh. Let me make sure everything in the comments looks good. So we're going to look at the Process Church. We're going to get a basic idea of like what it is, right? And then we are going to bounce over to that book. Copy that, put it in the comments here. Make sure the comments are working. All right, they do see. Did that go? It did. Can I pin it? No, that's not what I asked. All right, we're good. So there's our little link if you'd like to help this month. I had to buy Sammy a new license. I needed a new license because I had a birthday. Don't ask about my birthday. Again, these ones intentionally harm you if they can. And for me, they know sentimentality is one of my soft spots. Okay, so what is the Process Church of the Final Judgment? Now, here's the thing. Everyone says they call it process because of the auditing process. Scientology also had an auditing process, and there are a lot of people who say this church is an offshoot of Scientology. The problem with that theory is the timeline. Auditing didn't come around in Scientology until after the process Church of the Final Judgment started doing theirs. So it's fair to say maybe they're the same thing with different names. That's what I think the case is with a lot of history. You have a lot of these cults or organizations or political affiliations, groups, whatever you want to call them. They've been around since before our advent, since before we were born, and our lives are so short when these things happen, or in human history. We got to go back and do all this digging and spend half your life doing that now. And we'll tell you, one of the reasons I think I'm isolated and secluded is because I believe our lifespan is longer. I really do. And I think God is still in control, but I think our consent, like we have free will. And if we allow these beings to keep doing certain things, they're going to keep doing them. And I do believe that our lifetimes are longer than we know. And I believe truths like that are exposed in shows like Severance. That's why I don't cover every show, but I will cover shows that I believe have truth in them. Now, if you appreciate that, let me know, because I'm thinking of doing a specific set day for truth in movies, truth in television, whatever you want to call it, and then truth in music. And so if that's something you'd be interested in on a set day every week, now that I have a laptop, that would be pretty easy to accommodate for you guys, or for me to accommodate you guys. So just let me know. Okay, back to the Process Church. Now, the thing is this church came along allegedly before. Show this tab instead. And I'm going to close the other one so we don't wink out. Okay. So it says the Advent Foundation was in 1963 to 1966. It's fuzzy, they're not sure. The founders were the English couple Mary Ann McLean and Robert de Grimston. It's a kind of neo-Gnostic theology. They have a hard time pinpointing what they're doing here. Now, what they do is they take Lucifer, Satan, and thus far, just Lucifer and Satan, and Jehovah, and they put them as separate individual beings. Whereas Christian theology, you can kind of understand that when Lucifer fell, he became Satan. But there's a lot of controversy here, and I've said this. I have passed this along as being a theory, and again, I don't mean to give deceit podium, but for the purpose of this video, I'm going to say that Satan is the antithesis of Christ, right? He seems to be the polar opposite, but in a lot of ways, as you're reading, you feel like his archetype mimics or shadows Christ's. Some people say that Christ, when he came to earth, you consider that a quote unquote fall, physically anyways, he fell into human flesh from above. And it's theorized that he, Christ, his angelic name was Lucifer. So you get into some sticky territory here, and I'm going to try and do it justice and be very careful. This is not a posh web or channel. I do not have sponsors. I will probably never have sponsors. I will probably never be monetized, and that's okay with me. I'm not big on editing because I feel like editing is deceit. When you watch these reaction channels and they have the compilations, you have to be very careful with the editing that's being done there. Just like the Ariana Grande things, how people think she's being obscure or whatever. She's referencing her albums. And she's being funny about, I think she's funny, but she's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Deadpan, kind of like me, like a real dry sense of humor. So you can't really tell when she's joking and when she's not. That is not to say, however, that there isn't truth in those videos when she talks about mind control. They're allowed to do certain things if it's passed off as art. We need to take advantage of that, and because it's going to be our fault in the end if we did not believe the truth and it was given to us. So we have, discernment is a thing. We've got to make that have a comeback. So what I'm going to do here, now it says they started a brief Scientology splinter group named Compulsions Analysis, which incorporated new religious elements. This delved into the Process Church, which was established in 1966. However, again, the auditing process itself was not around then. Now, I found a really cool website called the Black Vault, and it has Freedom of Information Acts that have already been released. That other people, they try and compile them and pull them from all over the internet. And hold on, let me check it out. I don't want to. Yeah, it's Freedom of Information Act copies of like the actual letters that people received. And there is one on Process Church of the Final Judgment. There was an investigation by the FBI done, and somebody requested those documents to write a book. And so now we have access to them. We should thank that author. Now I'm going to change the tab, segue over to something that I've been wanting to read you guys for a long, long time. And we will get back to the Process Church. Don't worry. Just give me a minute here, okay? And if you have suggestions or requests that you would like me to cover, as long as they seem relevant to like current events and growing our knowledge base and truth, seeking truth, I have no problem. I mean, I actually am ecstatic usually when people ask me to do things like that. It's more fun that way. It's more interactive. And I feel like I'm covering things then that you guys will learn from because you're interested in it. When somebody's interested in a topic, they're more likely to learn from it. This is the now we are going to look into the founders and the writers and the publishers. Whenever you get information, sources are key, but I usually do that last at like the end of a video or a series. And I will bounce around from series to series just because I let spirit guide me. I let the Holy Spirit, I pray it's the Holy Spirit. I let the Holy Spirit guide me. So this series is called Sinister Forces. It's a grimoire of American political witchcraft. This is book 1 called The Nine. I actually bought the books. Peter Lavenda, he was also the author of Unholy Alliance. Trine Day. Interesting logo for the publishing house. No? Again, that's why publishing houses fantasize. Fascinate me. Fantasize me. Now, I want you to take a look at Poor Rose, which is interesting. Is that a occultic thing, or is there really an actual rose person? Now, I read a study in Scarlet about a month or two ago on the channel just to see if you guys were interested in this. We're briefly going to bounce over here to the Dunwich Horror and Occult History of America. This shows you how the groups that pilgrimized, that colonized or recolonized the coasts of America, it shows you what exactly they were leaving behind in London. Now, they would say they were escaping religious persecution. And I would say that's not because they were Christians. I would say it was because they were doing other things that they shouldn't have been doing to manipulate people and possibly time and space. And there are certain things, just because you can do it doesn't necessarily mean that you should. I can go fling myself off the side of a tall structure if I wanted to, but I choose not to because I like my limbs where they are. So this is the guy is that a lizard person? What is that? Okay. So this is H.P. Lovecraft. If you don't know who he is, he wrote a lot of occult stories like the Kraken and the Call of Cthulhu and Rats in the Walls. He was like, if this tells you anything, he's a dark version of Edgar Allan Poe. Now I'm just going to check and make sure everything is streaming, because it is possible that the streams that were cut off because of user error. I am new to this tablet streaming thing. I've used I've used laptops before. Obviously, I went to school for 4 years on one. And I know how to set up a computer to have double monitors, which is really cool. I wish I could do that now. So this is H.P. Lovecraft. That makes more sense. The drawing, I can't read the writing. To R.H. Barlow, something, something. safe sculpture to this trivial. Wow, I don't know. He was born in 1890, wrote weird stories from an early age. Illness interrupted his education many times, so he turned to reading. He soon began to write. He published his first story, The Alchemist, in 1916 and continued until his death in 1937. He populated his stories with mythic creatures, mixing fantasy and prehistory, and created a new genre of literature with legions of followers that continue today. Above is a drawing done by Lovecraft himself in 1934 of one of his main creations, Cthulhu, which is weird because that's definitely not how I pictured Cthulhu to look. Isn't he supposed to have tentacles and all that jazz? Interesting. Oh, whoops. All right, so we're just going to skim this. We're not going to read it all, but people need to understand where our political parties came from. There's a reason that I don't vote. It has never seemed, and I'm not putting down anyone else who does. We should absolutely have the right to vote since you're in America, and that's how things operate here with our executive and legislative branches and whatnot, and Congress and Senate and blase blase. All right, I'm not saying that you shouldn't vote. I'm saying I don't know enough about politics, and I don't know enough about how it works, and I don't know enough about when they're lying to me, and I'm not going to put my name under another man's name and then be submissive to that person in spirit. And I personally think that's why everybody is so polarized today. Obviously, they want us arguing over politics, religion, gender, skin tone, everything, anything. They don't care what it is. They just want you on a side. I'm not picking a side. And people might be mad at me for that. They may call me a coward for that or whatever. I'm on God's side. And as far as politics go, I think the whole sham should fall down and it should be showed for what it truly is. But then what do you do? Well, then they would bring in somebody to, just run things for a little while till we get our collective shit together again. And who's it going to be? Well, it's going to be someone they want to put in there. I'm in a fair amount of pain, so I'm doing the best that I can as far as not scooching around a lot and having, background noise. Okay, so the Dunwich Horror and Occult History of America. When a rise in the road brings the mountains in view above the deep woods, the feeling of strange uneasiness is increased. The summits are too rounded and symmetrical to give a sense of comfort and naturalness, and sometimes the sky silhouettes with a special clearness the queer circles of tall stone pillars with which most of them are crowned. Do you know what that's about? Can you hear it? What do you relate that to today? To me, it reminds me of our mountains that look like pyramids and the obelisks that are on top of some of these mountains that the hikers, go and take pictures with and say, yes, I did it. Reminds me of that for some reason. Okay, no comments. So I'm going to move along. I can pop the comments out, but I don't know what that'll do to how everything operates. And I really just don't want things to be messed up. It says he was writing in the 1920s when most of his more famous stories were published. He was writing of New England. Now, New England are the New England states. It's where the people from England landed and made it New England. Okay, that's why everything over here is named after stuff in England. There is something weird though about the city planning, and I get into that, and we're gonna look more at that and movies having typecasting issues as well, because you might not think it, but this is all connected. You might have noticed the last several years that Hollywood has really been vocal about their political standings. Do you want to know why? I'll tell you why right now. Because you can't deny that they have been brought to the forefront away from the fluff and the silly and the oh, don't listen to that person, the Dave Chappelle days, right? They're leaning into the stuff now, right? They're leaning into whatever's going to help them persuade or dissuade or manipulate public perception. Used to be that Hollywood was very subtle about their persuasive measures. They're getting desperate. They need people to be indoctrinated and to be on the same page. They need to know that nobody is going to be a fly in the ointment when they really start hammering some of this stuff home. This is why you're seeing them be so vocal about politics. You know, when I started figuring things out, somebody gave me a hard time about something I said in an old video, real old, and I knew that I was onto the truth. And I commented on somebody's page too. And after that, people started following me from video to video. How they do that, I don't know. Well, they look at your history, I suppose, and try to gauge where you'll go next. I don't know. Well, and they got technology for that. And that's, let's not lie, they can trace you and track you even online, from website to website. Now, I knew that when I was getting a little bit of grief that I hit on something. Actors and actresses can go all over the world. When a regular person tries to do that, we have all of this red tape that we have to get through. And sometimes, even if we jump through all the hoops, we're still on a don't fly list. Who would make the best operatives if you still had spies and espionage happening? Actors and actresses. That's why I showed you, and I did that video about World War I and II, where you had all these like Bob Hope and Marilyn Monroe going over, and they're on the aircraft carriers singing and dancing and with the troops and hugging them and holding them. And, you know, the troops have to let loose a little bit. Okay, so everybody just puts a war on hold to allow Hollywood to go and visit with the troops. That doesn't seem like a conflict of interest to anyone. That doesn't seem a little bit suspicious, suspect. Let's carry on. Actors and actresses would make the best CIA agents because their goal is to manipulate public perception, just like they did with things like Ruby Ridge and Waco. They manipulated and framed the story before it could happen organically on its own, so that people had already made their minds up that the government good, religious bad, government good, homeschoolers bad, government good, independent thinking and critical thinking bad. Very basic. And when I say base, it's not good. I mean, I want to make that very clear. I don't know where people are getting their definitions for language these days, but I told you that part of the plan for Agenda 2030 was that they were going to use, and this is verbatim, to flip the vocabulary to the opposite, something about making it opposite, so that by the time we figured it out, it would be too late. Ironically enough, that information is no longer available. I'm going to check the 2025 plan because maybe they slipped it in there. And maybe I can find it now with the Bing search engine and a laptop. We'll see. So he was writing of New England, and his imagination had ancient roots in unknown cultures where druidic circles and pagan chants would infest the countryside, where a kind of subterranean culture existed parallel to the world of our own reality. He peppered his stories with references to the works of archaeologists and anthropologists, some real, some fictitious, and connected the American Indian culture to the worship of strange, perhaps extraplanetary or extra dimensional beings who viewed humans as little more than undercooked hors d'oeuvres. His work has attracted a great deal of attention in the past 30 years or so, oddly enough, in France, where, like the films of Jerry Lewis, he is an adopted obsession, but also certainly in America, where he maintains a cult status even now, more than 60 years after his death. Now, this book was written in the late 90s or mid 90s, I believe. He has attracted serious, albeit fringe, attention from academics and historians of both literature and mysticism. Now, okay, so they're just kind of telling you who he is. In addition, there are several hardcore occult organizations, this is why they're telling you this, in Europe and America that owe allegiance to the bizarre principles outlined in his works. So there's a little gaslighting. He's telling you right there that you're a fool if you believe that any of H.P. Lovecraft's stories are rooted in truth. You're a fool. Do you see how they do that? Very subtly, so that your mind changes without you even realizing it. Do you see? I try to point these things out so people can catch on to the motivations and agendas behind the individuals bringing us information. So right there tells me Maybe I should give more credence for these cryptids and quote unquote monsters. Maybe there are things in the seas that attack people. Um, we used to have pirates and the like. We used to have the seas used to be as brutal and war torn as land. There's a reason that that stopped. There's a reason they stopped going out to sea like that. So it says they've taken their names and identities straight from his published work with cults like Dagon and Cthulhu and occultist emeritus, Kenneth Grant, what has written extensively on the relation between the works of Lovecraft, an author of Gothic horror fiction, and the rituals. See, he wanted to tell you again. These people were fools, right? Now, again, we want to maintain balance. But I'm just telling you to pay attention to that. He's obviously got a little axe to grind. And obviously, he's an author. He's going to have a perspective, right? He has his perspective. So I'm not saying all this is true. I'm just saying he brings us some information that maybe we should pick at a little bit more. And the rituals of modern ceremonial magic and communication with extraterrestrial intelligences like Lamb, right? And Crowley. Part of the reason for Lovecraft's popularity among serious occultists that many of the ideas he put forward in his stories have found some basis in reality. So here we come to it again. Are these authors prophets like Dean Koontz, Lovecraft, however many more there are, screenplay writers? Are they prophets of a sort so their words happen? Is it predictive programming and they're telling us how it's done and what their game plan is? Because they can't resist because they're so, arrogant. Balance, okay? Have balance. I can't tell you what to decide, but I can tell you like when you're being gaslit. That I can definitely tell you. Okay. So part of the reason for Lovecraft's popularity among serious occultists is due to the fact that many of the ideas he put forward have found basis in reality and historical, archaeological, anthropological reality. So they've been able to form some basis of actual research here that backs up what he says in these alleged fictitious stories. Interesting, no? So again, is he psychic? Is he a prophet? Or are some people so powerful the words that they put on paper happen? And that's why Hitler burned books. It wasn't because he detested knowledge. It very well might have been because he had that notion too. Like these things that people write of keep happening, right? Now, I can't tell you what to decide. Do an experiment, write something down, but use black ink and use a good kind of vellum. I bought some online myself, and I will do an experiment that I may or may not record. I haven't decided yet. Um, you want some black ink using some type of calligraphy pen would be best. Write something out. Put it for a future date. Future date it. Something small. On this day, so and so came to visit, or this happened. Something that you have allegedly no control over. Something small, again, because when you try to manipulate the free will of others, that's a form of witchcraft. Okay? Any type of editing, any type of concealment. Now, God hides things, and those who seek truth are searchers and researchers and diggers, right? We dig for truth no matter what. There's evidence that America was visited or possibly inhabited for some time by people who are not racially or at least culturally identical to the Native American, quote unquote, Indian tribes that exist today. The schools of thought over this are contentious and emotional in defending their respective positions. The group most consistently under attack are the diffusionists, whose most famous proponent was the late Harvard professor Barry Fell. I want to say something else that I found a parallel in, and I want to see if anyone else sees this. Does everybody know here who Jack Parsons is? I'm sure if you've done any kind of research at all, you've seen him. Um, Chat is up and running, or it should be. So, just so y'all know. There we go. I just wanted to make sure I was seeing things good on my end. Okay. Jack Parsons, he allegedly invented the rocket for NASA. And we know NASA, all they really do is make movies. Interesting that those two people that are gone now had to be gone for 9 months. And she lost a lot of weight, no? Huh. 9 months. Go figure. Did she maybe have a special baby? A baby nobody else knew about? What were they telling us? Because, and I'm going to say this again, I think AI is already running the news. And when something happens or a hiccup happens, then a person goes in and intervenes and says, oh, we did, this was wrong, or we were too early with this, or what have you. But I think AI has been running things way back since they announced that the Pope had died in 2019, and they quickly retracted. You can't find it anywhere now. Jack Parsons reminds me a lot of Elon Musk. A lot. Like, is it him? I don't know. Okay, so who adhered to the idea that America was not settled by a single group of wanderers from Asia across the Bering Straits, but by different groups of people from different parts of the globe. Yeah, tell me. France basically discovered America and nobody ever gives them credit. All everybody does is mocks France. I'm sorry, that's where my people are. So it makes me, of course, feel some type of way. And therein lies the tale. We will examine all of this in detail in chapter 2. For now, let us look at some well-known stories, but from a different perspective with additional data that bear light directly on the theme of this work. Seen and sometimes unsettling light, they provide a basis for the revelations that will come. But before we examine the archaeological evidence, let us look purely historical evidence, the evidence that can be supported by unimpeachable primary sources. Says you. 1492, uh-oh, here it comes. Lost American learns very early in their primary school education that America was, quote-unquote, discovered by Chris Columbus, which we know is not true. October 12th, 1492. 12/4/92. I'm sure there's something there. Some of them remember that he was supposed to be finding a more direct route to India by going west instead of east. And that is why we call Native Americans Indians to this day. Has a flat earther ever tried to put his path together and decided maybe he just knew the earth was flat and maybe he knew where he was going already? I'm just asking because I'm not science or physics girl. I don't do that part of things. That's definitely not where my gifting lies, and I definitely need help in those areas. The result of Columbus's blunder in believing that the small Bahamian island he discovered was part of the Indian subcontinent. Cuba and Hispaniola, the island now in the Dominican Republic and Haiti, was not well known as the real reason for his expedition. Yes, he wanted to find a fast route to India and China. At the time, the great seafaring nations of Europe, in particular Portugal, but also Holland and other maritime powers, were going south along the African coastline, surrounding South Africa at the Cape, and going north and east to reach India. Columbus, based on what are believed to be faulty geographic measurements and a faith in some of the apocryphal books of the Bible, though he could make it to India much more quickly by going due west from the European coast. Yeah, there's a flat earther thing in here. This is a tell, only, again, the physics of it I'm not able to always nail down. But if you put that together, something's wrong there with what they're saying. And again, I'm not that girl, and I don't want to interrupt the whole video to go down another trail. The Portuguese had turned this idea down, realizing his math was faulty. Was it? The Spanish at first rejected him, but later he had an audience with King Ferdinand of Spain, who agreed to fund his expedition and to grant him titles, land, and a tenth of whatever precious metals he found, an agent's commission. This much is consistent with what we knew as schoolchildren. However, Spain in 1492 was in the middle of one of the greatest upheavals in history. To understand what Columbus was doing and the hidden agenda from his voyage, and thereby to begin to understand American history from a European perspective, most Americans being, after all, descendants of European ancestors, we need to understand what was happening in Spain. The history of Islamic imperialism and its stormy relationship to Europe in general and Christianity in particular. So now we get to the root of it. But we're supposed to be picking politics and uh, uh, a separation of church and state. My mom used to say that. Let me be clear, there's actually nothing like that. Nothing like that anywhere. There's no law about that. No, there isn't. Because America was founded on Christian notions. You don't have to believe, but the evidence rather supports it at this time. And I prefer, facts when able to go with facts. Faith fills in the gaps. That's what faith is. And that's why it's called blind, because faith is belief without sight. You have to be blind in a certain way to certain things. And you have to be immune to the lies that they try to tell you. So you had basically what was happening was a religious or alleged holy takeover by Islam. Islam having the same notions that Christianity has or had, wanting to take over the entire earth. You see that they did not, but that doesn't stop them from trying, and they're still trying today. And they might succeed this time. But as long as one is here, there is a remnant. So, I mean, they can try as much as they want. That doesn't mean they'll get rid of everybody. The biblical story comes out in every story. And again, I've said this so many times, and no, people don't intend for it to, I don't think. The authors that write these stories and books don't intend for that. But it's there. It's in Pinocchio. The whole biblical story is in the story of Pinocchio. Like, that's a dark story if you've never looked at it. But it's a story about redemption. It's a story about a fall of a sort when Pinocchio gets down off of that table and walks away from his dad and the life, everything that he knew. And he returns like the prodigal son. But while he's away, he gets trafficked by his friends like Joseph in the Old Testament. Every story is the biblical story. You might think your children don't know and you're keeping it from them purposely. They know. Any story they've heard, they know Christ, or they've been given the chance to know Christ. I had somebody say that. Somebody did a video response to my older channel. People just would not leave me alone. And he showed his children, and they did not look like his children. That's all I'm going to say about that. He was redheaded, lumberjack type in the woods, I would assume. I hope you see the relation between that and Sasquatch. Mark of Cain. Is it all that hair that the Sasquatch wears? Why would men want to shoot him upon sight, but then once you realize he has the mark of Cain, that you can't kill him? How would everybody know not to kill another being just because of a mark on it? Unless the mark was the face of man peeking out from underneath all of that Sasquatch hair. Is that the mark of Cain? I don't know, but I'm putting things out there. What do you think? Well, such a topic deserves way more space and time. We can summarize the situation as follows. Praise God. Interested readers are urged to follow up with their own research. Essentially, we must address the birth and expansion of Islam. Muhammad, the prophet who created the religion known as Islam, had a vision of the angel Gabriel while meditating in a cave in what is now Saudi Arabia. Interesting, Gabriel's also the one who went to Mother Mary. He's also the one that the kids used in this, the Mandela effect. What is it called? Analog horror story. Those are so interesting, and I'm not sure who's making all of them, if they are children, but a lot of them are biblically grounded, and a lot of them are giving truths of what's happening today. Again, people are using their gifts, trying to warn people, I believe, because they're writing stories about this over there, and you guys should check out Reddit for stuff like that. So the vision of Gabriel. Now, let's be careful because I don't want to offend Gabriel. Ignited something in Muhammad's heart and soul. Oh, wait. Okay, so he had the vision of Gabriel while he was meditating in a cave in what is now Saudi Arabia. He was 40 years old, a tradesman, a pagan, and troubled by hearing Jewish and Christian tradesmen and others around them discussing their respective religions. Monotheism was a new concept, and the year was 610 AD. The vision of Gabriel ignited something in Muhammad's heart and soul. He began preaching a personal and unique amalgam of Jewish, Christian, and native Arab mythology and religious and moral principles to anyone who would listen. These principles included better treatment of slaves and women, a life of moderation, a surrender to the one true God. The word Islam means surrender, and other spiritual doctrines. Abstinence from alcohol and the eating pork were also included, the latter a probable borrowing from Jewish law. Let's be clear, you don't need Jewish law to give you common sense. Once I knew what a pig actually was, because I had a hard time ever since hearing Charlotte's Web, but my dad instilled in me a great liking for sausage and bacon. But let me be very clear. Your body can tell you these things. Your mind can tell you these things. Once I understood what a pig was, no matter how good, and the bacon probably was only good because of the salt, and the sausage was probably only good because of the sage. Ask yourself why we have to put all these seasonings on things if they're so good for us and they are supposed to be food already. And again, I'm not preaching here. The goal is to put a light on certain things, and the goal is to activate or ignite a fire within you to seek truth and to seek God. And God is truth. So it's kind of, you can't seek truth without stumbling onto God. And everyone who studied the 9/11 thing that happened and every one of the alleged conspiracy theorists out there, if you did not become converted by the end of your search for, or not the end, but at least the end of that search for truth, you're a heretic because God has already presented himself to you in so many ways. Now it's going to be you're going to have to go back to him and say, "Hey, I accept you," because you've already rejected him in that way. I mean, these things are, you don't need somebody else to tell you most of these things. Even Christ said even a child could do it. Once I knew what a lobster and a pig actually do, like what their job is and what they eat and consume, no offense, but I don't want to eat what they eat. I just don't. They're the garbage cans of the land and the sea. I don't want to eat that. You can if you want. It tastes really good. Like, everything that's bad for us always seems to taste good. But again, when you eat the crabs, it's more the salt and the butter because you have to put it in something to really taste. Do you see what I mean? What I'm getting at here? I don't know. I love crabs too, though. I'm not even gonna lie. The people in his native Mecca found Muhammad to be something of a problem because his doctrines interfered with trade and with the status of the social elite, because he wanted women treated different. And I'm going to tell you that that was one of Christ's problems. He had women following him, and people probably, and I mean following him from place to place, and people probably did not like that unmarried women were following this Jewish rock star around. And that's probably how they saw Christ, right? Um, some Jim Morrison type, some hanger on, some, Manson type of person. That's how they saw Christ back then. So much as Christianity had evolved from a messianic Jewish cult to the world religion and was about to conquer much of Europe as a political power, so too Muhammad and his followers were seen as a political and economic threat. So here is why church and state aren't actually separated. You can say that all day long. That does not make it true. Do your due diligence and research. There is no such thing as the separation of church and state. 5013C should prove to you that there is no separation of church and state. That's why when the state changes, when they change the faith of, like, when they change their doctrine, they're going to expect all of their citizens to follow suit. You're going to be expected to be Islam, or you're going to be expected to be ecumenical, or whatever this new thing is they're building. That's going to be the exception. There is no separation of church and state, and there never was. There never was. And all of this stuff, you can pause it here and you can read this. I don't want to get into this too much. Piece of black, probably meteoric rock. I wonder, it makes me wonder if it's obsidian, like what their big rock is made of. His religion grew in numbers, so Muhammad grew in power. At the time of his death, Islam was virtually the state religion in Saudi Arabia. During the next 100 years after his death, Arab armies would give the idea of missionary work a new meaning as they conquered with fire and sword nation after nation, extending their faith and the Arab culture as far afield as France, where they were finally defeated by Charles Martel at the Battle of Tours in the year 800 AD. So again, please keep saying how much you hate France because France saved you all from being under Sharia law, ladies. So please, again, and again, this is why you're seeing this. This is a holy war. This is a political war. This is a culture war. It is all of those. It's an amalgamation of all of the negative everything. The negative everything negative that we've exhaled here in this nation, right? It's all coming back again, like the Ghostbusters 2 movie when all the pink goo comes to animate things, and like if it's in a bad you're in a bad mood, it's in a bad mood. If you're happy, it makes you happy, that type of thing. We are facing our own, we made our beds. Muhammad's descendants, both familial and spiritual, then fought over the growing Islamic empire. Europe saw Islamic forces of their soil within a century after the death of Islam's founder, and in Spain it would be another 800 years before the last Islamic rulers would finally leave their country. Specifically in what year? 1492, the same year Columbus allegedly discovered America. So it seems to me perhaps he was on some type of mission to find either a place for the Islamic people to go. That's all it'd be another 800 years before it would finally leave their country, specifically in the year 1492. Okay, so Tales of the Alhambra. In the spring of 1829, the author of this work, whom curiosity had brought to Spain, made a rambling expedition from Seville to Granada in company with a friend, a member of the Russian embassy at Madrid. Accident had thrown us together from different regions of the globe, and a similarity of taste led us to wander together among the romantic mountains of Andalusia. That's from Washington Irving, Tales of the Alhambra. In the spring of 2001, the author of this work, whom business had brought to Spain, made a fast expedition from Seville to Granada in company with a colleague and executive of an American corporation that has a factory in Seville. Accident had thrown us together. Da 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 da. Now they're going to tell you some stories about how America started. We're just going to briefly look at this and we'll go back to the church. Doing all the driving that day, getting us out of Seville, so they're traveling. All these strange bedfellows, they're traveling. As was the case with the earlier tour to Rome in company with another such executive, I found myself less of a chauffeur and more of a tour guide and ad hoc historian as we wandered the fabulously decorated halls and courtyards of one of the most striking examples of Arab architecture anywhere. Dude, their mosques are epic. They are just as moving to me as an old Catholic church, the original Catholic temple churches. Um, but that's the thing that they would come in and they would take over the Christian churches, and then the Christians would come in and they would take over the mosques, right? And so you had this holy tug of war happen. I mean, it's still happening. You watch them debate, it's still happening. I don't understand this let's end everyone that's different than us mentality though. Allegedly, people get these ideas from God and God tells them to end people. We had the Canaanites, that whole massacre happened, but we know that happened because they had turned sour, the Canaanites, because they had the angel, they were hybrids, right? They were giants or whatever. And it did something to their mind too, obviously. They didn't listen when someone's they're not to eat, they're not food. Apparently they didn't listen, right? So there was something wrong with that whole bloodline. And God knew this, and God knew what would happen if he allowed them. There would be no flesh left, just like Revelation says. God had to put an end to them. And we're going through the same thing here and now. These are cyclical events. Now, why they keep happening, I don't know, other than giving all the souls a chance to be filtered and be the best you can be. I don't know why it's still continuing. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a teacher. I'm learning with you and hopefully sharing with you. So this case was no exception. The executive in question has a mother who is fascinated. So these guys are traveling together, right? And they're getting to know each other. So this is what he's telling you about the American or one of the executives he's traveling with. The executive in question has a mother who is fascinated by church history and who has a passionate attachment to the Holy Land and especially to Jerusalem and to the Holy Sepulchre, the site where Christ is supposed to have been laid to rest after the crucifixion. Sorry, I needed a sip of water. Yet her son, a tall, self-important man of heroic proportions with paranoid demeanor and somewhat lacking in social skills, seemed relatively unaware of Arab conquest in Europe, even though he had accompanied his mother on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem and is beneficiary of her knowledge of the subject. I found myself filling in odd gaps in his understanding of the stormy relationship that has existed between Muslims and Christians virtually since the death of Muhammad, and in particular since the Moorish invasion of Europe in the 8th century. Now, again, you have all these people saying, my people, my people, my people, and you think that they just mean African American, people of color. They're talking, this is Muslims too. Like, they're just like Christians. They're just like us. They're trying to avoid censorship. They're trying to talk to each other in kind of codes, right? But they're organizing. Are we organizing? Have we gathered like I said we should? No, nobody wants to, you're still hanging on to the worldly stuff. It's all going to be gone unless you're going to bow down and do what you're told to do. It will all be gone. We should be organizing. That's what we should be doing. And not for any type of, I am a pacifist. I'm not a proponent of violence. I just don't know. I think we should be spiritually evolved past that point. Nonetheless, it was an alien transplant in Europe and surrounded as it was by hostile Christians on every side and separated by sea and land from its spiritual home in the Middle East. It eventually succumbed to pressure from without and within. So they're telling you why they left in 1492 and why Columbus wasn't actually looking for America. That was not his goal. That was not the objective. And now they're making him look like a fool all across the centuries, poor guy. The Moors were vanquished finally in January 1492, the same year that Columbus set sail on his first voyage to the New World, and that was not a mere coincidence. King Ferdinand was triumphant in moving the last vestige of Muslim political influence from Western Europe and began to dream of another conquest. This is what America's school children never learn and what scholars have been slow to report. From the Diario of Christopher Columbus, then. So this is from his diary. Columbus says that he hopes and Columbus says that he hopes in God that on the return he would undertake from Castile, he would find a barrel of gold that those who were left would have acquired by exchange, and that they would have found the gold mine and the spicery and those things in such quantity that the sovereigns before 3 years will undertake and prepare to go conquer the Holy Sepulchre. For thus I urged your highness to spend all the profits of this my entire enterprise on the conquest of Jerusalem. And your highness laughed and said that it would please them, and that even without this profit, they had that desire. The conquest of Jerusalem and the Holy Sepulchre, in other words, another crusade. You know what's funny? And people that watch my channel a lot are going to say, Jen, you always point to this. Okay, obviously he's giving us a little bit of a summary because he says, and Columbus says right there. So he's not giving, it's not he's not using quotes here. So if you want to know exactly in his words verbatim, you'd have to look it up. I find it interesting that everyone says he was looking for India. I find it also interesting that she wanted his conquest to be looking for the Holy Sepulchre. And then, fascinatingly, he misjudges by a couple of continents and ends up in America. How many times have I told you that America is the real site of Israel? How many times have I told you God told me that? This is what they do, and it's the same thing with the Process Church. They start an organization or a group. These people gather, and then that group is absorbed by the bigger one, right? And they do this all over the country. 5, 10 people. You don't need many. Heck, it started with 2, right? The husband and the wife. You send a couple of your recruits out once they are properly indoctrinated and they understand the doctrine, and then you send them out. And so maybe they start another group, and that group calls it something else. Maybe they call it the family, like Manson, because Manson was in the Process Church, and he lived right down the road from their headquarters. Manson, who was also widely known and reported to be a CIA asset. Doesn't it make all these things come together when you have the proper perspective and you can see history laid out a little bit? If you appreciate the information, please do give the video a thumbs up. The channel itself will never be monetized, but lets me know if I'm hitting on all cylinders with you guys, if I'm speaking appropriately and using the right vocabulary, and I'm not too old and my lingo isn't too old that you don't understand what I'm saying. The discovery of America and the subsequent voyages of Columbus had as their goal the recapture of America, or the recapture of Jerusalem. Let me read that again. The discovery of America and the subsequent voyages of Columbus had as their goal the recapture of Jerusalem. And they're still going to tell you, oh, he ended up in the wrong place. Oh, and let me ask you, if this woman, this investor, was so interested in this, if she was so interested in this, do you think then once she found it or gained control over it that she would tell anyone else where it is? Or that she found it? No. You'd rename the whole place and act like it served no consequence. Ask yourself this, if you're watching TikTok videos and you're finally seeing the technology. I mean, I saw a subway in China yesterday, and our subways are so decrepit compared to theirs. Theirs are shiny and new, and I don't even know how to explain it. They're like something out of a movie. And they do drone shows. People here are going to be so deceived by this Project Bluebeam because China and Japan are so far ahead of us. Like their 4th of July their whatever you call it, their celebrations. I've watched some of those now too, and they've all been with drones. And you got people here freaking out over one in the sky. They wanted to make a joke of us. They wanted us to be a nation of sacrifices. That's what we're supposed to be, orphan children. That's why they didn't want people getting close to us, because in the end, they knew what they had planned for us. It is a nation of sacrificial rites. Now, I was just reading before I put everything up for the video itself. And you're going to say, Jen, you're leaving. What if you're proven wrong that they weren't, that they're going to say whatever they want to say? They don't get it yet. He still doesn't get it. Ferdinand believed he could attack Jerusalem from the eastern side. No one would expect a crusader. Ironically, then American history begins in the sands of Palestine. So I'm telling you, they're doing a lot of work to hide the fact that America is Israel. Like a lot of work. These stories are kind of ridiculous at this point. So we're going to go back to the Process Church before I get irritated. Let me make sure you guys are able to see this. Because I'm going to show you a couple other now that you get an idea of like, I mean, you didn't completely. We're going to, hold on. You stay here. I'm going to look at this. Much has been made in conspiracy literature of the possible connections between the stones of Jerusalem and King Solomon's temple and the Holy Sepulchre and the Dome of the Rock, where so many have fought and suffered and died for religion and still do. Why are there still parts of the Grand Canyon that we're not allowed to go into? Why? Columbus had, with the outlawed Knights Templar, to set his fleet, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, bore the red crosses. And that's what they tell you Red Cross is. And they're all cults, all of them. And they want to find certain people who won't be missed if they disappear. I don't trust any of the charities now, which stinks. Like, that's really in a bad place to be. So let's go a little further. In spite of, you can see what it says there on the screen. In spite of all the rhetoric denying this, there's some truth in the suspicion that devout Muslims are hostile to the West. Let's be real. There are radicals in every group, okay, that hate somebody, okay? So keep that in mind. Islamic rulers have been a long and well documented history of anti European aggression, beginning with the invasions in the 8th century AD, long before the First Crusade against Jerusalem, particularly since the end of World War I, when the 500-year-old Ottoman Empire was finally destroyed by Western forces, and when the betrayal of the Arab Revolt was etched in stone at the peace talk in where? Versailles. Where did I grow up? North Versailles is what it's called in Pittsburgh, but it's really Versailles, right down the road from Duquesne University, which is also French. Why are there so many places named? Why are there down in New Orleans? They speak France or speak France. They speak French. Up in Quebec, Canada, they speak French and English. I'm so scared about how people hate Christians and how they hate French people and how they hate anything that's different than them. Like, it's so old. Although in the past Christians and Jews fared better, oddly, under Muslim leaders than under Christian administrations. You know why? Do you know why yet? Have you figured it out yet? Looking at the charismatics praying over their idol, their golden boy, Trump. Have you figured it out? I don't care if they tell the world they're Christians, they're witches. Speaking in tongues is babbling. What it meant in the Bible, tongues, that word, the definition of tongues, is to speak a variety of languages. Each tongue is a different language, a legitimate language, not something you guess at and babble about. God did give me a word in Hebrew once. And you know what it was? It was the word for the Holy Spirit. Ask and you shall receive. Don't follow these people, man. Don't follow anyone on the screen. You don't get on the screen unless you're in good with Lucifer. And I have a theory that you don't even get on the screen like that until they have your life. Because for us, it's just about mind control. The mind control is the politics. And where does the politics intervene in your life? On TV. It's nowhere else. It's on the screen. And then you go vote for some person that you'll never meet, you'll never see, they'll never help fix your car, they'll never pay a bill for you. I don't know where I'm at when I have insight and other people don't, because I was the exact opposite before all this started. I was dead in my sin. I was the walking dead. I was asleep. I did not see or hear in the spirit. Sure, I had eyes and ears, but they weren't being used properly. I was terrible to my body, which is why I'm dealing with issues now. Don't be like me. My testimony is a cautionary tale. I humiliate myself and embarrass myself with the stories I tell to help you. Not because I want 38 people to see a video in 11 hours. I'm like the worst YouTuber ever with these numbers. What's funny though is my ratio is high. My likes are very high. So by algorithm standards, my videos should be seen more. I should be getting more subscribers at this time because of how my analytics look, and I'm still not. How long have I been running on this channel and not the other one? Still nothing, right? You got to ask yourself why. Go to the small people, go find the small channels, go ask them for the news of what's happening in their areas. Now they're going to tell you about some battles and the Crusades. And I'm not saying these things aren't important. I'm saying I want you to understand where our politics come from. The Crucible, the rumors of devil worship were partly justified by a peculiar secret cult which had gained force there and engulfed all Orthodox churches. It was called the Esoteric Order of Dagon and was undoubtedly a debased, quasi pagan thing imported from the East a century before. This is from The Shadow over Innsmouth by H.P. Lovecraft. So again, you have more truth in fiction, okay? Now we're getting into all this. In the meantime, however, strange things were taking place in North America, a short ride from H.P. Lovecraft's hometown in Providence, Rhode Island. I have an uncle that lives in Rhode Island. I went there for a wedding when I was younger. All it did was rain. I thought it was just like PA. It was just another, like they were pretty much the same. When they hear the word Salem, many Americans automatically think of either the cigarette or witchcraft, both potentially lethal phenomena to be sure. My mom smoked Salems, and she came from Apollo. Oh my God. Oh, whew. Ironically, they do share a common origin. And people who say that like signs and symbols and numbers, we shouldn't be paying attention to them because that's wicked. They follow people. They legitimately do. When I first met my spouse, he said 714 was like his lucky number, his favorite number, whatever. And it's attached to him. Now it was in the address of my youngest son. I told you what happened with my youngest son and how he now behaves like his father. Again, these are things they do. They have no respect for consent, nor they don't respect children's consent, right? So they use their vessels in ways that most people have no ideas of. Some of those ways are to possess them and to live that life because that's how they live is through us. And if you're not baptized and if you're not like doing the right things and these attachments can attach to you and change you. 714, those numbers are in my dad's phone number. I didn't even realize it till last month, but they're in the address of the city and the road where I grew up and I met my spouse. 714 is also again in the address of my youngest son's place right now. So whether you try to or not, certain numbers and things attached to people, and it's almost like an algorithm. You can almost track people by their numbers, and it's bizarre and it's wild, but it's legitimate. And sometimes if you know the ways of your enemy, it helps you to be more prepared. People will say, well, why don't you be proactive if you're playing chess? That's just it. I've already won. He's still on the board sitting it out. I've already overcome. Now I just have to endure until the end. Now, it might not be fun. It might be physically painful. It might be hurting my ego a bit too. But I've already won. God said, stand firm. That's what I've done. God said, believe in Christ. I've believed. God said, love your neighbor, even when they're hateful to you. And I do. I love Muslims too. Like, I love talking to them. Most of them are very knowledgeable. And I've had some very good conversations with them on my channel. So, and you're going to say, well, isn't that ecumenicism? Isn't that the way of the Antichrist? His way is going to look very close to God, what we think is God's ways. You have to understand that the Antichrist is not going to come in saying he's the Antichrist. That's not how it's going to be. Is it how it is right now? Even I'm still a little confused. I know that the guys we see on screen are basically proxies, that they kind of don't even exist, but there are individuals that they're based off of. I know that sounds wild, but it's the truth. And sometimes what you're watching, if it's a B movie, isn't even a movie. It's actually parts of somebody's life. And I know you're not going to believe that either, but again, it's true. And we're going to look at all that. So now they're getting into Native Americans and how they brought a Native American. She wasn't an African slave. Okay, so this is about the Salem witch trials. Was not purely the result of overactive imaginations and hysteria, a term with rather offensive origins in that it implies that the womb is the source of emotional instability in women. Ugh, God. Some of the accounts of demonic possession ring strangely true, accompanied as they are with reports of paranormal phenomena, intense rage, blasphemy. And when I say strangely true, I hasten to clarify that these states are virtually identical in every respect to those accounts of modern day possession as reported by Catholic and Protestant clergymen in Europe and the United States. Many have insisted that there was no witchcraft at Salem, but the evidence readily available proves otherwise. And again, let me be very clear. I was called a witch. I told you that was going to happen, and I was. Golden Boy himself at my job, the last time I seen him, called me a witch. Or one of the last times I saw him. And that he was actually happy the day I was getting fired. I knew I was getting fired. I actually brought in a picture that I drew and I put it on the bulletin board and I said, "Here, that's for you guys to remember me by when I'm gone." And I got fired my next shift. It might have been that shift, I can't remember. Um, so again, these people, the symbols and the things they do and the you have to pay attention. You have to dissect certain things and you have to look at them. The other thing that rings strangely similar to possession cases or demonic oppression and repression and obsession is alien abductions. And that was happening. They want everybody to be demonized at this point. They want everybody to have one, at least one. Okay? And they want you to have one that is controlling you. That is the goal. They want you either, and if they can't get that to happen to you, then they want you either shut up by being committed or ended. That is what they want for people who go against the stuff that they're doing now and what's going to follow. And as I said, I look for a big announcement this Friday. They usually don't, ironically enough, they don't do things on weekends, but I sense that changing too. If they really want to stick it to religious people, they're going to start doing things on Sabbath. And most people consider Sunday Sabbath now, but some still Saturday. So again, you watching these things, you got to pay attention. Other assumption that is often made is that the Salem witch trials were the first and last in the United States. Nothing could be more wrong. America has been home to accusations of witchcraft since the earliest colonial days, as well as to alchemists, astrologers, and occultists of all types. In fact, the situation was becoming so serious in the late 17th century, the clergymen of Massachusetts were issuing warnings to their flocks about the dangerous attractions of occultisms in the colony. Yet the history of European style occult practices in the American colonies begins earlier than that. There are records of witchcraft accusations and trials all over the East Coast, and particularly in New England from the mid 17th century on. Connecticut, Vermont, Maine, huge states for occult practices. Huge, huge. And I think they're liberal too. It's a religion, guys. Okay? The rainbow flag, that's their religion. They think that they're Gnostics and they're not even doing that right. When Christ said he would make her a woman, he did not mean literally. Although although angels are allegedly androgynous. I had somebody who was stalking me on my channels forever. But he's not the only one. There are other people that for some reason seem to think that man and woman can somehow be molded together. Like me and my husband, I don't mean by ending us, I mean by somehow combining us. I don't mean through surgery either. I mean through alchemical practices. There are some beings, I believe, that can do that. They can show up as a male or a female if they are angelic or they have that hybrid DNA. They've been working on this for a long time, guys. The giant gene is recessive. You can't just look anymore and say, oh my gosh, that's a giant, that's a cannibal. Now they are the people who are your neighbors. And again, I've told you this ad nauseum. The warning, like my channel could not be more of a warning channel. Like, that's all I do. And yes, it gets weary sometimes, but just know that I do it because I love you. I do. Even the people who've done me harm. I miss working with those young people so much. The one gal and me used to like experiment and see what we could bake. And she was so funny. She reminded me like of my mom and my sisters when I was together with them. And the other girl, she reminds me of my son so much. Likes the same bands, kind of dresses the same way. She's kind of goth. I really like her a lot. She's really cool. So yeah, I love my enemies. I do. So we're gonna keep going. Oh geez, why are you going so fast? Oh, look at that. We'll go up a little bit. Wonders of the invisible world. The New Englanders are people of God, settled in those which were once devil's territories. And it may easily be supposed that the devil was exceedingly disturbed when he perceived such a people here accomplishing the promise of old made unto our blessed Jesus, that he should have the utmost parts of the earth for his possession. Cotton Mather. Um, Cotton Mather, he's one of the Puritans of that era. He's rather popular, like John Smith. Francis Yates, the aforementioned historian of the University of London, the British Academy, the Warburg Institute, and the Royal Society of Literature. Wow, that's quite a name to spit out. Has written extensively on the Elizabethan period and the Renaissance, with a particular focus on occult literature, thus elevating the study somewhat above its usual relegation to the attention of cranks and publicity seekers. She makes an interesting, if daring, claim that the Puritan movement owed much to the occult ideology current at England in the time, with connections to Pico della Mirandola, don't know who that is. Cornelius Agrippa, I do know who that is, and other saints of the occult canon. They're occult saints, okay. This form of occultism, known as Christian Kabbalah to historians, was an amalgamation of the Jewish Kabbalah with Muslim and Christian elements. Okay, stronghold, ecumenicism. The Antichrist system will be all about ecumenicism and looking like on the surface that we're all getting along, we're all equal. It won't be equal because they'll ask you to forfeit Christ. We're going to all have to forfeit our idols and agree on monotheism. Um, I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm not going to get into that debate right now. But I will say, again, that Satan copies everything, or he outright puts his name on things that God has created. I have a really strong feeling that all of these things that are being done in this time, God is going to get then claimed for his own. So there's a reason God is doing this. There is a quote unquote good side of ecumenicism, and it is no holy wars. It is getting along. It is peace. It is peace. However, and I looked for that word on the 15th too. If they have this unholy, has been telling me to watch for this unholy trinity, then I watch for that to also happen around the same time. Somebody needs to remind me I said that so I don't forget. Yeah. So among these was the belief in a sophisticated form in numerology where letters have numeric equivalents and in the rituals of invoking angelic forces. And that would be John Dee. We've talked about him a little bit. He was an English guy. And what happened there? They were doing fine. They had the Enochian language. They had everything going well until an angel showed up and said, it might be a good idea to swap wives. You might want to do that. Kind of like they did with Joseph Smith, too. You don't want to do this. Don't do this. Here, do this instead. Catholicism is the only religion thus far that does not excuse or quantify or has not yet absorbed into it the practice of polygamy. I don't care what you say to me about it, it's wrong. On so many different levels, on the physical, on the spiritual, you could catch a disease. Like there are so many things. It produces jealousy, the green-eyed monster in the women, which is a sinful state to be in. And again, the devil knows this, right? He knows that if he puts one error in each church that people actually go to that actually have some deposit of faith. He knows that if he puts a lie in there, that he's got you. And most of those are, I'm sorry, Protestant churches. He gets you to degrade Mother Mary. He's got you there. You're going to get judgment for that. He gets you to upgrade Paul and put Paul above Christ. You're going to get it for that too. Like all of these, there's no reverence in the Protestant movement. There's no reverence towards the Eucharist in the Protestant movement. And I could go on. The girls that I know talked about me behind my back, gaslit me about the personal things, okay? And I've told all the stories, and I will open up all the videos and soon. There are a couple that are still hidden where I talk about what happened at work, like right after leaving work. I don't want to publish those yet. We'll see how the views go and how the channel goes. I'm trying to get it back into some type of algorithm, but it has not happened yet. Thus far, obviously. So basically what you're seeing here is all of these things are coming together, and they had mystical elements that they had in common. Among those was the belief of that numerology has these special forces or special equivalents and angelic forces. Eventually, this intellectual and spiritual movement came to be represented in such organizations as the Rosicrucians and Masonic societies, and to embrace various other occult disciplines such as alchemy and ceremonial magic. Look, here's the thing. If you're going to call somebody a witch today in these times, then you better make sure that you're not on anything pharmakia related. This is not a medical channel. This is not medical advice. I'm telling you, don't be a hypocrite. Okay? We're all guilty of witchcraft right now. Everyone that's on the internet is guilty. Everyone that's using a black screen, guilty. Everyone that is in idolatry, guilty. Everyone that does their horoscope, guilty. Everyone that does scratch-off tickets, guilty. Should I go on? This channel is where we can put that stuff aside and get to truth and figure out how to be a community again without trying to end each other. Because if they're gathering and they're telling us now not to gather, that's when we should be gathering. Oh, and I had the wrong channel on. I was reading that book and I had the wrong screen shown. I'm sorry. Anyways, now you're starting to get the idea. Look, if you want to get a screenshot. Now you're starting to get the idea of how these different disciplines kind of came together in New England, okay? Their governor was a practicing alchemist during his administration. It is noted that his library contained some 275 books on alchemy and the occult. He was well versed not only in these arcane matters, but also on the subjects of Rosicrucians and Freemasons and Templars. Rosicrucians, a putative secret society whose existence was proclaimed at the very beginning of the 17th century, probably by occult scholar Robert Flood. So we could go on and on and on. Wow, during Winthrop's tenure, in fact, many people were accused of witchcraft, and 3 were executed. Wow. Rebecca and Nathaniel Greensmith of Hartford and Mary Barnes Farmington. So they're going on and on now to give you and show you early Mormonism and the magic worldview. See, they're showing you how everyone who founded America was basically into the occult in some way, shape, or form. All right, so what is the Process Church of the Final Judgment? They were founded in the early 60s and they were disbanded in the 1970s, but they were rebranded and they turned themselves into an animal welfare league in Utah. And now they are one of the most highly praised animal care places, shelters, animal organizations around. So let's go somewhere else. And I'm going to show you something from the FBI Freedom of Information Act files. Okay. Again, this is the Process Church of the Final Judgment. I gave you a definition from the Wikipedia page a little bit here today. And in the last stream, I went over who they are, when they were founded, and that type of thing. So this investigation, now this is the actual, I went past the intro where it tells you BS. This is the FBI, Los Angeles, California, dated May 31st, 1972. Everything that's redacted on here is in the white box. Process Church of the Final Judgment. This investigation was predicated upon information purporting that captioned organization was originated in the United Kingdom in the mid-60s, had established branches throughout the U.S., and particularly in Los Angeles. We got to look at Laurel Canyon, too. A review of the files of the Los Angeles office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation produced the following information regarding the Process Church of the Final Judgment. On May 25th, 1972, two individuals identifying themselves only as blank and blank made an appearance in the Los Angeles office of the FBI. They indicated that they had received word that the FBI wanted to talk with them concerning a local murder trial involving Charles Manson. They explained they were ministers of a religious cult and preached about Satan, and that Charles Manson had been a follower of a similar cult. Blank and blank were advised that no, the FBI did not wish to talk with them regarding the trial of Manson, nor did the FBI investigate legitimate religious organizations without due cause. Interesting. Without due cause. I wonder what's going to happen with the FACE Act. I wonder if that's going to affect me the next time I attempt to go to church. How many of you want to bet that it does? How many of you want to bet that that's the undoing of a lot of us, and that Christian persecution is about to go very overt because they reversed that act? The Church of the Final Judgment, 627 Uralene Street, New Orleans, and Toronto, Canada. In addition to the above information, they left the attached material concerning their church to give further background information. On May 12, 1972, LAT1 furnished the following information to a representative of the FBI from the Los Angeles office regarding the Process Church of the Final Judgment. This organization is run by blank, who is also known as blank. Now, I think I know what that says, and it is the Christ of Darby Street, or no, the Christ of Carnaby Street. I'm sorry. We'll get into the players either later or in another video. We'll do a couple on this since it was a request. And again, I did post the link just because this is not, I do not monetize God or the words that he brings me or the insights that he gives me. But this is related to what we're looking at. And so I felt it was okay to put up the link because I know times are tough for everybody. So again, it's there if you want to use it. If not, I understand. That's fine too. I'm going to continue doing what I do because people need to know these things. Source further advised that the Magical Mystery Museum, now this is great. Does anyone know if that's the place where Zach Baggins bought? Is that the museum that Zach Baggins, the kid from Ghost Adventures, bought? Is that the thing that Zach Baggins bought? Because he's already having problems with it. And I just think that's wild if it is. So I'm going to have to look that up too and see if the Magical Mystery Museum is what Baggins bought. But I think what Baggins bought was in Las Vegas, if I'm not mistaken. It's a front for this satanic-oriented cult. So they're saying that this magic MMM, wow, that's probably a cult thing, is a front for the satanic-oriented cult. Source supplied the names of 6, interesting number there, individuals believed to be members of the process, and furtherized that the process acted as the enforcer or muscle for the Church of Scientology. The 6 names, again, this could also be so deep that they want to make the Church of Scientology, they want to bring it down. So then they get this other group to do that. Is that what they're actually doing here? I can't be certain, but that's what the FBI does. When things get too big and they're bigger than the government and they get attention like Waco or Ruby Ridge, they got to spin it. And they got to go in there and see what's actually going on. Are they a threat to the government? Are they a threat to our democracy? Whatever that even means at this point. Voting matters not. They just want you arguing. What you put down on the paper matters spiritually. Those people are actors, man. The process further advised that they acted as the muscle for the Church of Scientology, the 6 names, and there's the 6 names. And I think you've got 2 males, oh, wait, a couple of Caucasians, a Mexican, and a man of color. According to the source, the process had its origin in this Arizona State Prison. Yeah, I believe it. A lot of cults start there. My family member, that's when he really changed, was when he came out of jail. He was not the same person. He started changing before he went in, though, and that's why I say these people getting arrested, it's intentional. They want arrested purposely and intentionally. For whatever reason, they need 3 days, like Christ, to be away and do whatever it is they do. I think I have an idea what they do. Is it right or wrong? I'm not going to get into that. So here we go. Title: Process Church of the Final Judgment. Reference: memorandum dated and captioned as above. All sources, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so now what you have here is a copy, a very bad copy. This is the guy they're calling the Christ of Carnaby. I read the Wikipedia before I got to you guys. This is a copy of their newsletter. And as you can see, copiers were terrible back then. Okay. For some reason, what are you afraid of interviews? Now, this is key. They want to know what everybody is afraid of. Doesn't that sound very familiar to what we're going through now? In fact, I know of a little Appalachian channel that I used to love with a couple of twins on it, that it seems like once a year they do a video. This is what I was afraid of, or this is my biggest fear. And then they ask everybody to comment, what's yours? What's your biggest fear? Don't tell people that. We tell people too much. There's no, yeah, you should tell the truth, but there's nothing that says you have to speak to people. There's nothing that says you have to reply. And even if there was, it's your mouth. You don't have to tell anyone anything if you don't want to. The last thing you should be telling people in this day and age is what you're afraid of. When they ask you, say nothing. Say, I'm afraid that my Cheerios will be soggy before I get sat down at the table to start eating them. That's what you tell them. So the process, now you can read what's written. It's the drawings that are gone. It says, what is it? What does it mean? What doesn't come from? The Devil's Dictionary: mad, an adjective, affected with a high degree of intellectual independence, not conforming to standards of thought, speech, and action derived by conformance from study of themselves, at odds with the majority. In short, unusual. Ambrose Bierce, published by The Process. So that's the Devil's Dictionary and his definition for the word mad. So this is what tells you what's going on. This is their own words. So let's see what they say in their newsletter. And this was obviously before the year 72, and they were disbanded really quickly. So England, Scotland, and that's the thing. If they were worried about them so much, they didn't last very long at all. They didn't even have time to like have a rise into popularity. So it's very possible that they wanted this attention. Again, serial killers write to police often. They want the attention. People say they want to get caught. That's not what it is. They don't want to get caught. They don't have talent, right, to be on TV for like music, or they're not handsome enough to be an actor. So they get jealous and they just want to finally be someone. And I know because of how I was abused, that's what he said when at a particular moment when he was severely demonized. I just want to be somebody. I was finally going to be somebody. Yeah, you were somebody already. To your children and to me, you were our hero. Now I don't know who you or what you are. They want the attention. They're arrogant. They what's the other word? Conceited, cocky, arrogant, smarmy. It's so smarmy to me, and gross and greasy like a pirate. And I don't like Johnny Depp. Most people love him, and I don't, because he's a part of this too. Watch. Insult Johnny Depp or Beyonce in front of any of these people on the Team of Darkness and watch how they come at you. Go ahead, I dare you. It'll be fun. I said Beyonce was not a good role model for women when I started getting converted and I stopped listening to her music, and you would have thought I ended somebody. Like, my spouse almost broke down because I insulted her. So, yeah. These people take their religion very seriously. So, in their own words, England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, France, Belgium, Holland, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, blah, blah, blah. To spread the word of the Lord Christ's second coming into the world of man. And this is the thing, though. Like, there's still at least somewhat, like, Christ is in the picture. And that's probably why they were absorbed into these other groups, because the other ones hate Christ, and so did Crowley and the other guy. I forget the other guy's name. He's a Satanist, though, so I really don't care if I forget his name. But the bald guy that channeled that lamb thing and tried to have the moon baby, which they might have succeeded at, and that's why we're having these issues now. But they're never going to tell us who that baby is. It was around the time my mother was born again. All this stuff is so creepy. I wonder if they were doing that moon ritual around the time that Roswell happened. Let me Google what date Roswell happened on my phone, guys. Hang on, because I just want to know if it coincided with when they're doing rituals out in the friggin' desert. Moonchild, that's what it was called. Moonchild ritual. Let's see when they did it. Crowley and the Black Lodge. 20s called Moonchild, in which a wizard performs a magical ritual in order to bring forth. Okay, so this is Reddit. Hold tight. And again, it's connected, so when I go off on a tangent sometimes. I was recently listening to a podcast and made an unexpected connection that I've never seen talked about on this sub between Aleister Crowley and Twin Peaks. Crowley had written a book in the 20s called Moonchild, in which a wizard performs a magical ritual in order to bring forth a magical child that will be birthed by the main character. Apparently, in the book, the main character finds herself at one point in a place called the Black Lodge. In this place, she meets a dwarf who loves music, a murdered girl, and the manifestation of all evil. So clearly, there are some connections to be made. On the podcast, they claim that The Return is the greatest study in occult magic ever to be seen on television. This is totally warranting a rewatch for me. I'm excited to view the show through this new lens. I never thought The Return as occultist either, but they're trying to tell us something there. Hold, please. That's not what I was looking for, but it was very interesting information. The Moonchild rituals are carried out in southern Italy, but the occult organizations are based in Paris and England. And at the end of the book, the war breaks out. The rituals are carried. So where? There we go. Okay. That's what I'm looking for. Jack Parsons, too. I knew he was there for that. The rocket guy. He is just like Elon Smith today. January 4th, the anniversary of L. Ron Hubbard trying to summon baby Satan. So apparently, on January 4th in 1946, the founder of Scientology teamed up with rocket engineer called Jack Parsons to create a moonchild. This was something they'd read about in Aleister Crowley's Book of the Law. So Crowley is the bald guy. Okay. And it requires a woman to give birth in the role of the whore of Babylon. It is based on a bit in Alec Novella Lee's astounding John W. Campbell, blah, 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 which contains this beautifully understated sentence. Hubbard was enthusiastic about the project. Ages ago, someone on Twitter posted this shot of a paragraph from the book, which I kept. Here it is. The ritual known as Babylon Working began at 9 at night on January 4th, 1946. That doesn't sound like an occult day. With Parsons, I wonder if there was an eclipse or something. With Parsons and Hubbard preparing magical weapons and talismans, and it continued for 11 days. Okay. Ew, that's my birthday, January 15th, Martin Luther King Day. See, they have us celebrating all this stuff, telling us it's one thing, and it's probably all occult. Okay, what else? It says, one evening, Hubbard claimed that he felt something knock a candle out of his hand in the kitchen. Parsons wrote, he called us and we observed a brownish yellow light above the 7 feet high. I banished it with a magical sword and it disappeared. Hubbard's right arm was paralyzed for the rest of the night. The next day, Hubbard allegedly had an astral vision of one of Parsons' old enemies, which he drove away. The next night, they prepared an altar, smashed a statue of Pan, and discovered the guest house where all this was happening was on fire. Oh, that's gross. Okay, you'd have to see the statue, but I'm not going to show you. The night after that, they were joined by artist Marjorie Cameron, who was an occultist married to Parsons wearing a crimson robe. Parsons and Cameron got down to the business of trying to conceive this unworldly child while Hubbard chanted nonsense, and the ritual was deemed a success. Although not when Parsons told him about it by Crowley, who responded, I thought I had a most morbid imagination as good as any man's, but it seems I have not. I cannot form the slightest idea of what you can possibly mean. Crowley also wrote to the Ordo Templi Orientis in America to say apparently Hubbard or Parsons or somebody is producing a moonchild. I get fairly frantic when I contemplate the idiocy of these louts. So Crowley wrote that. So he thought they were being idiots, because, okay. Hold. Okay, so which is A, wonderful, and B, means we can add to the list of things we know about Ron Hubbard. He was too far off his bonds, even for Aleister Crowley, which is quite an achievement. Marjorie Cameron was Parsons' second wife, incidentally. His first left him when he had an affair with her sister. The sister Julie ran off with Hubbard, who defrauded Parsons of his life savings. And when it comes to L. Ron, that really does sound in character. So he didn't even take the ritual seriously, which is wild. All right, let's get back to this. The end time is now. This is from their own Church of the Process Church of the Final Judgment. This is their own newsletters. They say the end time is now. The rising tide of chaos and destruction is the sign for all who choose to recognize it. The prophecies are being fulfilled. And a few have looked at us, shaking their heads. A few have stopped their ears. A few have turned their backs, and a few have abused us. A few have accused us. But to you who have recognized the sign and helped us in our work, to you who have taken us in and fed us and clothed us, to you who have reached out to us and given, to you who were afraid to know about the end but overcame your fear and listened, to you who accepted us and provided for all our needs, to you go our heartfelt thanks. God bless you all. For he that receiveth a prophet in the name of a prophet shall receive a prophet's reward. And he that receiveth a righteous man in the name of righteous man shall receive a righteous man's reward. And whoever shall give to drink unto one of these little ones a cup of cold water only in the name of a disciple, verily I say to you, he shall in no ways receive his or lose his reward. They're taking a little bit of liberty there with some scripture. Then they say, we asked some well-known people in London and some not so well-known people both in Britain and the US what they were afraid of. Here are some of the answers we received, edited only for the sake of clarity. Now, real quick, while I am on this page, you guys can catch up. Why do I read from things like this? This is straight from the horse's mouth. This isn't just the FBI's records. I mean, it is, but this is straight from them. So I want to know exactly, what they have to say for themselves. And what did fear mean to the Process Church? Because they want to know everybody's fears, but why are they asking this? Hold, please. I just want to see. Various commentators have described the Process Church as a religion, and it has also been characterized as a new religious movement. Some debate as to whether it is a form of Satanism. Jean LaFontaine, an anthropologist, noted that it was difficult to decide whether it was truly a Satanist organization. The Process Church's beliefs have been described as a kind of neo-Gnostic theology. Belief system. The initial phase of the group's beliefs, Moore and McLean taught that there was only one supreme divinity, God, and the focus of the group's activities was to transform those aspects of human nature which defied God. Many of the group's therapeutic practices or processes and concept were derived from Scientology including the term processing. In these therapy sessions, the group utilized an electronic meter titled the P-scope, which was based on Scientology's e-meter. Now, again, at the beginning of the video, somebody on Reddit said that those two things, they always connect them, but that the Process Church had auditing before Scientology ever mentioned it. So just to get that out there. In 67, Moore introduced the notion of four divinities to the group's belief. The Process Church preached the existence of four gods who were regarded not as literal entities, but as inner realities existing within each human personality. So it sounds like it's a lot of psychology mixed in. Accordingly, these deities were not worshipped. The names of its deities were drawn from traditional Judeo-Christian religion. They're known as Jehovah, Lucifer, Satan, and Christ, and were collectively referred to as great gods of the universe. The church stated that Jehovah is strength, Lucifer is light, Satan is separation, church is unification, Christ is unification. Each member was instructed to follow the god or gods which best suited them. Each individual understood as a combination of two of these gods. And it's so close, like there is some truth there. The church taught that an individual's personality and relationships could be explained by which gods he manifested. Moore, for instance, described himself as a blend of Luciferian and Christian traits, while McLean regarded herself as a combination of Jehovah and Satanistic traits. None of the deities was considered evil, but basic patterns of human reality. Moore taught the real devil was humanity, or the gray forces, which were understood as representing the compromise and conformity typical of the masses. They taught a form of millennialism. According to their eschatology, the four separate divinities would be unified in the end times. The reconciliation of opposites was seen by Moore in Matthew 5:4, where Christ tells his followers to love their enemies. Moore taught Christ's enemy was Satan, and that reuniting of the gods was achieved through love. I want to know why they're so obsessed with fear. Now, we went over the nicotine and all that yesterday. Okay. So, this is what Paul McCartney said he was afraid of. And this is right here on this document. I'm not afraid of people, nor afraid of the world ending or anything like that. It's just fear, really. A fear of fear. It's not fear of a lion or a man with a club. It's fear of a sort of an abstract fear. New Orleans, USA, someone said, chaos, insecurity, blindness, failure, being a fool when laughed at, not being there when I'm needed, going on in circles forever. That's a strange, I mean, I get it, but somebody in Glasgow, Scotland said they were afraid about money. Their finances were their problems. Somebody in England is worried about their son. Somebody else is worried about being a failure. Miami, US. Let's see what somebody from Florida's got to say. They're all so strange there. Be alone without someone to love or to think that no one loves me. Oh, God. Yeah, I know that. Jane Asher, an actress. I'm not afraid of people. They sometimes make me nervous, but not afraid. I used to be afraid of the world ending and all that. Since then, I've learned not to think about it. I'm afraid of the usual things. I'll tell you what I'm afraid of, being a bad lover, not being able to satisfy a woman. Then I'm nothing. Loneliness, this person says. Now, this is a quote by them down here in the corner. A man cannot lose his fear by telling himself that he's not afraid and believing it. He must know his fear, see it, feel it, and accept it. Then if he does that which he is afraid to do, says that which he is afraid to say, thinks what he is afraid to think, feels what he is afraid to feel, sees what he is afraid to see, and knows that which he is afraid to know, he has no fear. For by making known what was unknown, only half known, he discovers his basic invulnerability. I have been a big proponent of not fearing in these times. And if you do fear, that's the definition of courage and bravery, is to push through that fear regardless of it being there. Those are our heroes today. Those are the actual plans yet. And again, these are the images in their own newsletter, which did not copy well, did not run off well. Now this one says, where do you belong? Do you follow Jehovah? Accepting your fear, but onwards with faith and courage to rise above the sense of failure and dissatisfaction that surrounds you? Or do you answer to Lucifer, supposing yourself okay, so this is really hard to read, but I'm trying for you, and this is their own words. Or do you answer to Lucifer, supposing yourself free, or supposing yourself from the ways of the world, suppressing yourself, using your love of life and beauty together with an unwavering optimism to make you fearless in the face of all that could threaten you? Or is Satan your master? What does that say? Clinging upon you to defy your fear, to plunge in where you are most afraid and discover that after all, you are invulnerable? Or do you feel trapped in the way of the gray, compelled by force of circumstance to hide your fear? Do you feel so inhibited by the world around you that you dare not even acknowledge your fear? Think again. Each one of us has a choice. Which is more worthwhile? Being yourself as you really are, or the preservation of a joyless image? They are persuasive, man, I guess. Christ, the emissary, is there to guide you. There is no way out, but there is a way through. There is no escape, but there is fulfillment. Knowing is the way, and knowing is not analyzing or speculating or rationalizing. Isn't it great when we're done theorizing and we know something is true or not true? We need more of that. Knowing is fearing experience, something clearly, understanding, absorbing, experiencing, and going through, expanding and going through. Knowing is living what you know, living what you are, thinking and feeling what you are afraid of, allowing yourself to think and feel, saying and doing what you are most afraid to say and do, but you know what must be said and done. Then you can begin to know yourself and who and what you are, your inclinations, your revulsions, your capabilities, your limitations, your strength and your weakness, your responsibilities and your effects on others. And you can begin to know the consequences of being what you are so that you can cease to be afraid of them. And Christ the emissary is there to guide you. He is the way through. He is freedom from conflict and release from fear. All that is true. Everything they said there is true. I'm not saying it's a good religion or cult or anything. I'm just saying that was true. I've been a big proponent of do not fear, right? To overcome your fears. But they are correct. The only way to overcome your fear is through they used to call it exposure therapy, but I've been doing it the last several years on myself because of everything I've been going through, and I've been exposing myself to situations and things that I was afraid of on purpose, and I can't tell you how much it's helped me. Let me make sure we're still good here. I'll read a little bit more and then I'll end this video, and then we can talk about it some more tomorrow. We will get into the actual characters and or people. If you guys are interested, let me know in the comments. Please start conversations again. It is so nice to see everybody sharing. There are so many of you that have so many similar stories, and I know we don't trust easily now, but it is time. I'm going to read this last part because the worm comes into my testimony. It was mentioned a lot to me by the spouse's best friend, the one who I said was basically like an oracle to me. He told me a lot of truths, even though he was on the wrong side and he did things to severely harm me. He gave me a lot of truth. And just because I don't accept or receive him into my life anymore doesn't mean I'm going to throw away the truth that he gave me. Now, for some reason, again, I was shown and talked to about everything that was going to happen. I just wasn't able to put it together quickly enough. And when I did start talking about it in 2019, they started greatly suppressing the channel. But the worm was mentioned to me about, oh, nothing happens when you die. You just get thrown in the ground. We're like animals. Be with just one partner. Just all this stuff he was saying. And I'm like, if you are his best friend and this is really what you think, you really shouldn't be like around us because we're married, we have a family, like we are a family, and all these things you're saying are bad are how we live our life. Like, like we're living our lives. But worms were mentioned quite a bit. So let's read about what they think about the worm. Now, worm is also another word for what? Parasite. In the Essene Book of Peace, I read, it's on the channel as well, way back. There are playlists, though. I read the bits that are important to avoid copyright infringement. You can't just read a whole book verbatim. That is copyright infringement. So I read the most important parts, and if you're interested, you can go read them and take away what you can. I don't always remember to include links, so if you want them and I didn't link them in the description or in the comments, please just remind me. So this is from John. Fear is the catalyst of action. It is the energizer, the weapon built into the game in the beginning, enabling a being to create an effect upon himself, to spur himself on to new heights and to brush aside the bitterness of failure. Now remember, this is a guy in the church, right? I think it might be the guy that started the church. Fear was born in Satan, god of ultimate destruction, whose being now permeates the universe. Its effectiveness springs from the knowledge of damnation that every being carries at its core, implanted there at the beginning of time as the marker and signal of the approaching end. I actually believe that too. I think that's why so many of us are waking up. The firmament has an expiration date. That's why you're seeing ice chunks fall from the sky. Why people are not, I don't think anybody's flying. I really don't. Very few people are flying. If they are flying, it is bigwigs. And they don't have to fly. They can use the underground tunnels, which we know they have. Elon is building one in Vegas now. He already built an underground tunnel in Los Angeles, allegedly. Did they actually do these things? There are some things, again, they will tell you they're doing. They will do that to take credit from God. But not just that, they'll do it to cover up things that are biblical. That's why I said the tribulation, it's never going to be televised. They're giving us clues. And it's not going to be a bunch of people going up into, get their heads lopped off. I don't think. Maybe soon, but not yet. It's not like that. They're doing very subtle things to make people, to persecute people in their health and their temples. For example, injectables. There's a reason I don't sleep with anyone else anymore. There's a reason I don't let anyone in my room. There's a reason I pray over all my food. There's a reason that I don't let anyone else prepare my food anymore. There are ways to make people very ill and it looks natural. Or you get the doctor to lie and say it's natural. Because a lot of doctors are alchemists. They are occultists. And I'm not saying all occultists hurt people. But I'm saying some, the radicals, just like there are radicals in every group, some do. And we need to know our enemies. And that's why I read these things. So he says, fear is the warning light, the vibration of terror that can drive a being up and away from the pit of corruption, back to grapple with himself on the road to his salvation. Courage is not the absence of fear. Wow, I just said that. But the recognition of guilt and of the fear that springs from guilt, so that shame may turn the being to look once again in the direction of his fulfillment. Fear is double-edged, and as with all things, there is choice for mankind in its use. Humanity can either use fear and the vibrations of Satan to recognize its guilt, to look for its wrongness, and to search once again for the path. Or it can use fear to hide its head, to retreat within itself, to play the ostrich of occlusion, and so increase its isolation and estrangement from truth. This way lies the pit and the waiting arms of Satan. Satan who paralyzes with fear, blinds with fear, attacks with fear, traps with fear, and annihilates with fear. Satan is fear. Satan is death too. In the Essene Gospel of Peace, they refer to Satan as death. They're one and the same. Everyone that says death is natural, we see it everywhere in nature. It's not natural. God would not be a creator and just create for the fun of it, for the love of it, to watch us all die. Something went wrong in God's plan, or it didn't go wrong. It was part of the plan. And we have to be okay with those things. We can't be like, oh, you're a blasphemer just because I'm asking questions seeking truth. It doesn't make you any more knowledgeable just because you have a special hat on your head. But if you tell me you have special archives that the rest of us have never been exposed to, now that might give you some authority. Now, this will be the last part I read for the day, and I may do a short at the end of this and practice editing, just that way I can edit certain things out as short uploads or shorts themselves. I haven't decided yet. I'm still thinking. I'm not a fan of editing, and I told you why earlier. The worm corrupts. Man's soul is eaten away as the relentless parasite of crippling fear makes slow, inexorable inroads through the outer layers of his mind. His body trembles and his pulse resounds. A crawling sickness drains him of all strength. Fear is upon him, within him, and all around him. It seems to come from without and yet from within. It is the air about him, and yet it radiates from the innermost depths of his being. He cannot speak as fear relentlessly destroys him. He cannot lift his limbs, for he has no strength. He cannot turn his head. He cannot move his eyes. He is transfixed. His mouth hangs open, but no sound emerges. He scarcely breathes. He is aware of nothing. His body is corroded by the cancer which no doctor can cure. Fear rules, fear controls, fear dominates, fear is everywhere. Man is alone except for the presence of fear. Fear is the essence of his stagnation. Fear killed his soul. Fear was the cause of the death of his spirit. Fear stands behind him on his right hand and on his left hand. Fear is his constant companion. Fear is in his dead eyes and the dampness of his brow. Fear is a clamp fastened to his tongue, a vice fastened to his brain. He does not move, but sometimes he is moved by fear. He begins to resemble fear. Man and fear begin to merge into one being. Man is becoming fear the parasite has conquered. Yet man does not know. He is afraid. Let's see what's coming next. It's more of their. Oh, wow. Oh, and their symbol. They're going to talk about their symbol and why they use it. How long is it? Several people have had their own ideas for our symbols. For instance, some of the occult ones explain to us that it's intensely mystical, as old as time itself, is a recurrent phrase and could represent anything from the four elements of energy in the universe expanding from a central totality to a long lost symbol of the space people. Others swear they have seen it on the domes of Arab mosques, on the patterning of Persian carpets. Magic, no doubt. Yeah, I've seen it and I can't even tell you what it is. I think it's an old like computer game thing, but I can't be sure. Yet others rattle at our doors with horrific visions of swastikas and doubtless flee terror-stricken with the thunder of our jack moccasins ringing in their ears. One person wrote to us as follows: your sign is still supposed to be a hyper exiological swastika, although one mind asserted it to be your view of this square old world. This is what happens when people fear and they let their fear guide them, though. They think all kind of things. We speculate because of the evidence put in front of us. Like, what is this really? You say it's a rock, but is it really a rock? Kind of like when they blindfold you and tell you to touch the elephant, and the person who has the trunk gives a different definition than the person who's holding on to like the leg. The person like rubbing the leg is going to say, man, that feels like a leather couch. The person with the nose is going to think something else altogether. You see, you gotta look beyond the frame that they're giving you. Suspended on four sides, ready to plunge into a bottom circular pit, this leads to the opposite suggestion. It is the spider in symbol form, which appeared on the back of process 3. That's different to me. Climbing out of the pit to get us. Appeared on the back of processors. Maybe it's, I don't know. Then there's the gentleman who crosses himself whenever he sees a process symbol, and yet another thinks that it is a cross. We are even told that there is someone who scrawls it on walls in Munich, and one to frighten the locals. In short, we've had them all. Sex symbols, road signs, voodoo magic, and mysticism, and the secrets of the cracked atom. We've had investigations from epidemiologists, explanations from numerologists, confusion from historians. This is so funny. Complications from Orientalists, even some quiet advice from the Foreign Office, which all rather surprise us because whichever way we look at it, we see it simply as the P of process, the same from all four points of the compass. So if you look at it from north, south, east, or west, they're saying it's a P. I don't buy that. I'm sorry, and I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but I mean, it could be a P, but then you're gonna have to say it could also be a P with an L, because you got the P and then an L or a TPL, the process TP. I'll figure out where I saw it because I have that memory like that. So they're saying we were wrong about it. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, I promise I'm done after this. But I figure if I put the link up, and I'm doing this because somebody asked, I'm trying to trying to cover it in an expansive way and show you that all of these things connect to what we're dealing with today, that all of these things built American politics, and that American politics is a participation in the occult when you take part in it. So, this is another page from their newsletter. I've been to your cavern several times and heard your people saying as it is to one another. What does it mean? So they're very open. They answer all the, they answer questions, and they're, I don't, again, the FBI was on their tail. And you say that they sometimes they only persecute good people, right? God's people. But then you see other people who are being persecuted, and you're like, all right, they kind of should be persecuted. But they know that God's people think this way. So you can't always look at you got to dig, right? You can't always just look at things on the surface. You got to know a person like Trump. What are his motivations? What motivates him? Why does he do the things that he does, right? So anyway, he says, as it is part of the exchange of acceptance, which is used by processians, I guess, as a form of greeting or farewell. Amongst ourselves, we generally avoid using terms as hello, goodbye, good morning, how are you, which are seldom more than meaningless gestures of artificial goodwill. Instead, we use the exchange of acceptance. One initiates the exchange with the words, as it is. The other responds with the words, so be it. Acceptance is seeing and knowing things clearly as they are and allowing them to be so, needing neither to pretend to ourselves nor to protest to anyone else that they are anything other than they are. A desire or intention to change things is not a failure to accept them. Acceptance is in the present. It does not mean necessarily allowing things to remain as they are. The exchange is not as it is, so shall it be. However, if in spite of our efforts to change it, something does not change, and we then have a need to pretend or protest that it has changed or that it should have changed, that is a failure to accept. When there is no compulsion that things should be a certain way, no demand, and therefore no fear that they may not be, then there is freedom to change things or not to change them at will. And at the same time, to have a total acceptance of the results of any efforts we make to change them, whether positive or negative. Our desire to change things is as much a part of what is as the things themselves. What is not a status quo, it is an instant in a mobile pattern, one frame of a motion picture, still infinite, yet a part of movement, change of what is an integral part of what is. The lie is not. To see in the future what is not in the present. The lie is to see in the present what is not in the present to see. Okay, I'm not going to play word games with these people. Satanists do that too. Oh, I missed it's like a Q&A thing. Do you really have, I don't want to say the word, I just don't. Do you really have group sensual activities? No. How do you feel about Scientology? Fine. Do you as an organization have anything in common with Theosophists? We don't know. Sir, I read the sensual issue of your magazine and I didn't get out it what the Sunday Mirror got out of it. Is there something wrong with me? If there is, then there's something wrong with us too, and a lot of other people. Process 4, the sensual issue, has been circulating for almost 2 years, and to the best of our knowledge, no one else has managed to get out of it what the Sunday Mirror got out of it. I now consider myself converted to the process. However, I have one difficulty. What does this make me? A processist, a processite, or a processor? I could go on, but it'd be easier if you tell me. We call you a processian. There it is right there. Which makes us collectively processians. Oh my gosh. All right, so we're going to end this one today, and if you want to continue with it, I will. Oh, wait. Hold on. Let's read this last part because it has religious stuff, and this is probably where you'll get to see their doctrine is a little wonky, or we'll get to see that it's the truth and I'll be converted. What do you think is going to happen? I know what I think is going to happen. Literally, Satan means the adversary, and the scriptures tell us time and again, at the end, the adversary shall be destroyed, and the forces of evil shall be conquered. And so it shall be precisely as it has been prophesied. But Satan, the God, the great, they call him Lord, has ceased to be the adversary. He is raised up and reunited with his counterpart and one-time enemy Christ, so that they might fight to become one again. We know him and have always known him by the name of Satan, and Satan he will remain. But the adversary now is something else. The adversary now is all the negativity in every human being. And that's where I told you about Ghostbusters 2, about how our real life Ghostbusters 2 pink slime would be black goo. If you've never seen Ghostbusters 2, I highly suggest you go watch it, because the plot and moral of that story is basically what we're dealing with now. Ghostbusters 2. That shows you what they're trying to say here about humanity being the enemy. It shows you about our negative phrases and behaviors and all that, how it gathers up and multiplies and turns into this physical pink goo. But for us, it's black. And I feel funny about oil too, but I'll do a search on that some other time. I feel like these are sentient beings and we should not be enslaving them, basically. Okay. We know, so it says the adversary now is the negativity in every human being, the hatred, the tension, the blame, the hostility, the self-deception, the misery, the antagonism, the failure, the futility. All those elements within each one of us that drives us downward and away from our fulfillment. These forces are evil. And that is Satan now. The Satan that shall be destroyed, consumed in the lake of fire, not the God Satan who brought evil into the world, first as a test for man, then as a punishment on man for his failure to withstand the test. Yeah, people need to understand that too. Like, God creates and these beings go according to their nature, most of them. Part of Satan's job must have been at some point to tempt us, or he would not be doing it still. He would not be so good at it. All things work for the glory of God and his plan and those who love him. We are beloved. Death, we're beloved. Death is a transition at this point. It's an illusion. I could say a whole bunch more, but I won't in this video. It says, but the evil itself remains. The adversary is still with us, and that is the Satan which shall be destroyed, the Satan within every human being. I've been pleading for God to remove the black goo from us, like the black dark wolf, the virus that is the dark wolf. Okay, so the structure of lies and distorted values in which human beings are trapped, moral codes, material standards, political principles, economic demands and programs, social convention, national barriers, racial prejudice, and class distinction. These are the components of humanity. It gets me to thinking about why the FBI interfered with these people. Why does the FBI interfere with any religion? Because they weren't that big, obviously, right at the beginning. And they brought them down pretty quickly. Or at least they rebranded and went underground. It makes you wonder why the FBI targets the cults or whatever that it targets. And I would be willing to bet that it's because of this right here. Political political principles, economic demands and programs, social conventions, national barriers, racial prejudice, and class distinction. These are the components of humanity. But they're not. They're not components of humanity. They're all fake structures. Well, I mean, not moral codes, but the stuff they're talking about here is systematic. These are the systems that we utilize. The monetary system, where we have to classify everyone and everybody has to be in a box and you got to check a box. I'm a woman, I'm a mother, I love God. That's all I know. Those are the only labels that even apply to me anymore. I won't take any others on. These are the source of evil. They are known as civilizations. They get it. But if we examine them and their effects, we see that they breed within the minds of those who are subject to them conflict, hatred, tension, blame, hostility, pain, suppression, ignorance, blindness, self-deception, isolation, uncertainty, misery, antagonism, failure, futility, apathy, and above all, fear. These are our adversaries. What does that remind you of? Maybe an election we just had? Ultimately, no human being is an enemy of God. If he represents himself as an enemy of God, then we must treat him as such. But ultimately, the enemies of God are 1. The structure of a way of life which surrounds and directs the human being, and 2. The seed of rejection and negativity within the human being, which first drove him to help create that structure and now drives him to preserve it, and which at the same time feeds upon the structure. But human beings themselves are not enemies of God. They are not the adversary. They may side with the structure and identify themselves with the evil within them and thus become part of the adversary, legion, what I said before, in which case they will be destroyed with the adversary. But basically, they are not the adversary. Humanity is not human beings. Human beings are not humanity. Humanity is that vast, unwieldy. Humanity is a trap. And human beings are caught in the trap. We built the trap around ourselves. We fostered it, preserved it. Oh, and what does that say? And something it to grow in strength and stature. This was our failure. And at the same time, it was our punishment for that failure. We are like man who is lured into using substances and finally traps himself into the agonies of addiction. The temptation, ironically, becomes the retribution. That's been true for me. Sin led me to salvation. However, I don't recommend that path to other people. That's what led me to know I needed a savior was falling. I didn't feel like I needed one before then, right? Thought I was perfect. But I obviously wasn't. Like I had serious issues before then, but that was just me hitting rock bottom. And we're going to look at that too, because I got a book saved for that about sin being a road to redemption. And again, it's going to be a cautionary tale for adults. You got to understand when to separate. We read things to gain information, not necessarily to apply that information. We read to accept and receive truth if it's there. Everything else we reject and we toss away. We don't need any of it. But now is the time of the end. Human beings have suffered enough for the sin of rejecting their God. We have paid the price of replacing him with a self-created, godless structure of existence. So that structure, the humanity which ourselves have made, must begin to be destroyed, as and such as its nature, that it is beginning inexorably to destroy itself. It is crumbling, unbridled by its own excessive and abandoned masks. Wow. Humanity, the child of the forces of evil, is dying, destroyed by its own destructive nature. The world of men as we know it is ending, and nothing can be done to save it. Human beings must be released from the trap. I actually agree with that. I've talked about that a bit. They too will die by the millions, and often with great pain and suffering, for the prophecies must be fulfilled. But to be reborn into a new order, not this time back into the same, what does that say? Agonizing retrace of godless materialism, for that is dying, never to be reborn. Praise God, praise God. That part I hope is true. Materialism has done us like that's the reason for a lot of America's problems. Human beings, unless they are irrevocably identified with the material human existence, which the world now offers its inhabitants, boy, they speak like aliens almost, though. As life will be released by the destruction of that existence. They will be freed from the physical human game as it now is, as Satan has been freed from his role of the adversary. Whether dead and reborn or surviving the cataclysms, there is release for human beings in the destruction of humanity if we will take it. If we identify with humanity and the forces of evil which created it, then we will die with it. But if we recognize its total invalidity as a way of life and see it for what it is, a living death, then we shall be free. Blame is the detonator of all evil. All sin stems from blame. All destruction stems from blame. Unless a man feels the need to blame, there is no destruction in him. Unless he feels the need to blame, there is no hatred in him. Unless he feels the need to blame, there is no evil in him. I would say greed. It begins with pride, though, that you think you have the right to do certain things. And the devil is afraid, for he is steeped in evil. And as with all things, by his fruits shall ye know the devil, and the devil's fruits are foul, bruised, and bitter, and rotten to the core, and the devil's home is hell. And as with all things, by its fruits shall ye know humanity, and humanity's fruits are foul, bruised, and bitter, rotten to the core, and humanity's home is the earth, and the earth is hell. Humanity is the devil. See, they go on saying here that we must be reborn, and that we are not evil, it's the stuff inside of us. But then they say this last part here, if we identify with humanity and the forces of evil which created it. I gotta do a study into the word humanity, human beings, and mankind, because we were called mankind. Why did we start using the word human? And are are we the same? Is human the same as a mankind? Why are they talking like they're not a part of? That confuses me. Like they're talking like they're another race. I thought we were one race. It's so cool to see people using my phrases everywhere. I don't know how it's happening, but it's amazingly cool. This is more from what people are afraid of. Huh. Rules of the game. Let's check this out. Each player has two separate pieces, a soul and a body. He begins the game with his soul at conception by throwing the dice once and placing his body according to the instructions. At his next turn, he throws the dice for his body and moves his soul again according to the instructions. Next, he throws for his soul and again moves the body accordingly. Interesting. Body enters the game. Soul remains in conception. Unenlightened toilet training and sensual addiction. Soul to guilt. 4. Only child, soul to isolation. Immediately love-hate relationship with parents. Soul to conflict. So it's telling you how you go from each phase. You know what I find fascinating about this, though, and then I'll end it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to read all that extra. What I found fascinating about this entire little dig we did here, first, that I'm so impressed that some of it is really on point. Like their doctrine, some of it is really on point, just like the Mormons, or LDS. I'm sorry. Uh, wow. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'm amazed that some of this. actually has truth in it. But again, then they start getting a little weird there at the end. So we're gonna have to look into some other things that relate to this, I guess. This whole journey has been wild though. I don't even know what to say about that, guys, really. Like humanity and mankind, are they the same race? I thought it was the same, it meant the same thing. Huh. That is wild to me. Like I didn't I had no idea. That's bizarre. I don't know what to think. So basically what we're finding out, especially by doing these two pieces of literature in tandem with the Sinister Forces grimoire, is that politics are occult practices. Everything they show on TV, the signs and the symbols, that's all alchemy. Alchemy doesn't have to be you actually mixing physical things. You can alchemize your emotions. You can alchemize your spirit. You can alchemize, you can turn anything into alchemy if you can get two things to combine or get something to change its normal form. That's alchemy. Pharmakia, that's alchemy. Some recipes are are alchemy. So again, I'm just trying to show you how steeped in all this we really are. And it's either we or gather and organize and exodus the system, or we just keep dealing with this BS like we're insane and complaining about it, but never doing anything to change it. And again, they already know what they're gonna do. They already know what they're gonna try and pass off as good or right or righteous. I think we should turn it all off, and that's been my opinion for a while now. And I just do this to try and reach out, kind of like the fishing at the Carney games, try and put my magnet in the water and see what comes with, because it's not my ideas or my words that are so grandiose or great or correct or righteous or true. It is the message that God's giving a lot of us right now, not just me. When I say it's not about me, I truly genuinely mean that. It's about all of us. And I thought we were run raised. And it is really cool to see the things that we say on our this channel and the things we've talked about. It's so cool to see that butterfly effect take place, but I don't know how it's happening. I don't know if more people are seeing this, if I am Truman, or if that many of us are just that alike that we start doing things that are similar and looking into similar things and saying the same things. But some of the phrases that people are using, like the young ones, I only started saying that 2 years ago in reference to the people in my son's generation and my children, because I didn't want to call them kids anymore or babies or whatever. So I just call them the young ones. Um, and it's stuck. Like I see people on TikTok doing that all the time now. So it's this whole ride has just been wild. Thank you for being here for it. Sammy's link is there. I had to buy his ID and my ID this month, and I lost my job, and I still had to pay off my winter coat. So I got the winter coat to walk to the job. Anyways, I don't know what we'll do about the money thing. The interesting thing is that I found out a lot about us in doing all this research. We don't need as much food as they tell us we do. We don't need half of the things they tell us that we need to live. We just don't. So it's time we really started living in the way we're supposed to live, because I believe our lives have a longer lifespan. I think they're hiding that from us. I think they're hiding a lot, and I don't think we should allow them to do it anymore. Okay, what's up next is I got to upload a short. It's going to be about a prophecy that is coming true. So if you want to see that, watch the channel for the upload sometime today or tonight. I love you guys. Stay blessed. And again, you've got to come to the channel to actually look for certain information, because the channel is not shown. It is not in the algorithm. Maybe we can help get it there. I love you guys. Have a blessed day, and we'll talk again soon. If you want me to finish reading from this book and the FBI files, let me know. But we will also check out the Black Vault, because that has Freedom of Information Act papers that have already been requested, like this one, and we can just go through that whole website in one video. That'd be fun too. So let me know what you guys are interested in. Have a great day. Bye.